I was trained to believe in precision, in the cold mathematics of intelligence work coordinates, dossiers, intercepted signals. Every operation had a rhythm, a predictability, the right entry point, the clean extraction, the silence that followed. Yet Iran was different. Iran swallowed silence and gave back echoes. The night I crossed the border, the desert air pressed heavy against my lungs, carrying the metallic scent of dust and oil. My equipment weighed less than it should have. Suppressed sidearm, encrypted comms, oxygen monitor clipped under my vest. The mission was simple on paper: survey an underground structure beneath the Alborz foothills, allegedly tied to nuclear development. We had infiltrated facilities before. We had seen centrifuges, weapon prototypes, Soviet blueprints repurposed. But never. This inside, there was no machinery hum, no chatter of engineers. Only a stillness so dense that each footstep from my boots struck like a hammer blow against the concrete. My headlamp beams skated across damp walls where Persian script flared faintly, as though painted with a brush of phosphorescence. My cum crackled once, then hissed into silence. At first I told myself it was interference. Underground stone, bad signal reflection, rational, explainable. But when I checked my oxygen gauge, the needle jittered between full and empty like a compass pinned in a storm. My breathing became louder than the silence, too loud, as if the cavern itself was amplifying me, mocking the rhythm of my lungs. That was when I noticed the shadows. Not long, stretched silhouettes that obeyed angles of light, but swollen blotches that pulsed faintly, independent of my lamp. One of them seemed to lean forward when I inhaled, another recoiled when I blinked. Remember whispering in Farsi under my breath, an old field trick to test if you're hallucinating. The words echoed back with an extra syllable, one I never spoke. Even now, under bright lights and sterile walls, I can still taste the air of that place like copper and ashes. I know what I saw was real, but the files say otherwise. They say the facility was empty, that we recovered nothing. My team never went as deep as I remember. They lie. They must lie. As if the truth was written plainly here in this debriefing, it would not be contained. The target site was cataloged under 3 separate codenames depending on which desk you asked. Site 42, Nokati Complex, or simply the Hollow. Intelligence indicated a subterranean installation cut into the bedrock beneath northern Iran. Coordinates buried under layers of agricultural cover in shepherd villages. Satellite passes had been inconclusive. Thermal signatures showed heat blooming in patterns that didn't T-match machinery or habitation. Too regular, too rhythmic. Wow. Washington pressed the theory of an enrichment chamber. Moscow whispered it was a storage vault for stolen Soviet warheads. In Tel Aviv, our own analysts noticed something stranger: seismic tremors that pulsed like a heartbeat every 41 hours, registered not just by Iranian monitors but by stations as far as Ankara. Whatever was buried there, it wasn't dormant. For the directorate, the stakes were existential. Israel could not allow an unmonitored Iranian weapons program to mature beneath the mountains. My orders were explicit: infiltrate, confirm or deny nuclear activity, and extract with data. Clean, clinical, routine. But intelligence is rarely routine. Our forward acid smugglers, ex-revolutionary guards, tribal informants spoke in half-warnings, wrapped in superstition. They described livestock wandering in circles until collapse, miners vanishing into shafts where no bodies were recovered, and old symbols carved into rock that no villager admitted to painting. The ground there, one said, voice shaking, remembers things older than men. I dismissed it, of course. A spy cannot afford to see ghosts in every shadow. Yet in the sterile language of our briefing folders, in the clipped tone of my handlers, I sensed what wasn't being spoken aloud. This mission was more than reconnaissance. It was a test of the unknown, and the unknown was waiting for us underground. We were 5, small enough to move without notice, specialized enough to cut through obstacles if the mission demanded. On paper, we were professionals. In truth, we were a collection of fragile lives, carrying our fears like smuggled contraband. 1. Commander Levi Stone Armin, team lead, a veteran of Lebanon and Syria. Levi wore his discipline like armor. His eyes were a pale gray that never seemed to blink long enough, as though he was always calculating, always scanning. His voice carried weight, even in whispers, calm, assured, a reminder that panic was not permitted. He carried a suppressed Taver rifle and a folding map older than most of us, edges curled with sweat and time. His superstition was silence. He refused to speak the names of the dead on mission. Foreshadowing. Levi would later forget names entirely ours, his own until memory itself became a blank map. 2. Dr. Yale Cohenfield, medic. Yale was calm where others fidgeted. Her bag carried more than bandages and antibiotics, sedatives, syringes packed with coagulants. A clinical mind, sharp enough to strip fear into symptoms. Yet she hummed, softly, when she stitched wounds old Yiddish lullabies, nearly soundless. I once asked her why. She said the body listens when words fail. She laughed easily, but her eyes never did, foreshadowing in the hollow. Her knowledge would scatter like glass medical facts, spilling from centuries that weren't her own. 3. Eitan Boomer Regev. Demolitions expert, every team needs its reckless spark, and Eitan was ours. Short, broad-shouldered, with the kind of grin that lit cigarettes even in the dark. He carried plastique in neat packets, labeled like candy bars. He believed every problem could be solved by force applied at the right point. His ritual was to flick his lighter 3 times before setting charge, a superstition born of bad luck in Gaza. Beneath the bravado, he wrote letters to his daughter before every mission, sealing them in envelopes he never mailed. Foreshadowing, in the depths. His body would twist under forces that treated him like raw material, reshaping flesh with surgical cruelty. 4. Avi Shalev, communication specialist, tall, angular, with a mind that seemed permanently tuned to invisible frequencies. Avi was quiet, more comfortable with radio static than human chatter. He tinkered with waveforms in the field, claiming he could hear patterns hidden in background noise. His one indulgence, a pocket notebook filled with shortwave call signs he'd collected since childhood. When he spoke, it was measured, deliberate, as if repeating lines whispered from elsewhere. Foreshadowing. In the hollow, those whispers would find him and, through him, us. 5. Myself operative redacted. I was the shadow among shadows, trained to blend, to listen, to vanish. Espionage was my craft, silence my weapon. My superstition? A silver coin I kept tucked behind my cums pack, worn smooth by thumb? I don't know why I carried it, perhaps as a reminder that even spies need luck. We entered the mission as 5 distinct lives. We would not leave as such. The hollow reshaped us into something else, pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit. Briefing began at 0200. The room smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Analysts moved like sleepwalkers beneath pale screens. Our handlers spoke in clipped sentences, windows of opportunity, likely routes, extraction vectors. The maps were thin blueprints and satellite overlays, annotated in biro with circles and times. Everything that mattered was redacted on the printouts I kept in my pocket. Objective: penetrate subterranean complex beneath Albor's foothills. Confirm presence, absence of nuclear process equipment. Obtain telemetry and environmental signature samples. Extract, deny. Rules of engagement, minimize footprint. No engagement unless unavoidable. Maintain discipline. Do not remain after 90 minutes. Gear checks followed the ritual of men about to cede control to technology. Levi read from a clipboard, and we answered like soldiers at roll call. Yale checked med seals and oxygen regulators, 2 spares per operative, recording PSI and filtration efficiency. Avi ran the cum stack, encrypted transponder, dual-band shortwave, portable quantum-hopped packet sender for burst upload. I-10 laid out charges and fuses, labeling each packet with the operation code in neat block letters. I tested my sidearm, checked the coin behind my pack, and felt the old certainty settle. We were prepared. Deployment was planned as a latitude insertion under dusk to exploit thermal inversion. A civilian freighter, registered as agricultural freight, carried our equipment to a drop zone near a shepherding village. From there, we moved on foot 3 hours along a dry riverbed, then upward into scrub, then to an access point where a decades-old service shaft mashed into bedrock. Our insertion timeline was measured to the minute. Every second unaccounted for would become a liability. There were anomalies even inside the planning. Satellite windows returned frames with inexplicable artifacts, heat signatures that winked out in staggered pulses. Not unlike a respirator failing and recovering, Avi flagged microbounces in the cum spectrum, signal reflections that appeared non-terrestrial in their phase. We chalked it up to atmospheric disturbance and poor imaging angles. Questions were noted, then stamped away by protocol. The briefing officer smiled too easily and said, "We have contingencies." He did not elaborate. On the eve of deployment, Yale drew a thin line on her palm and said a prayer I could not translate. Itan sealed another letter to his daughter and hid it under a floorboard in the support vehicle. Avi tuned a shortwave and hummed as he adjusted an antenna. Levi checked the map, then turned it over twice before tucking it away in, old habit of a man who did not trust flat paper to hold mountains. At 01:05, under a sky that tasted like iron, we crossed the agricultural perimeter. The air was colder than expected. My oxygen monitor registered normal, but my skin prickled with a static that had nothing to do with altitude. The shaft entrance gaped like a mouth. Our lamps clicked on in sequence low, then medium, then a flood that swallowed the darkness whole. For a moment the light showed nothing but routine, rust, ladder rungs, graffiti in a language I could not read. Then the light crawled across a line of faint markings carved into the concrete marks that had not been on any of our satellite images. Levi signed the timeline with a single nod. Nice said, 90 minutes. We stepped inside. We descended by ladder into the throat of the mountain. The shaft smelled of old oil and something older damp earth folded into iron. My boots found rungs that had been chewed smooth by 100 hands. The metal sang hollow underfoot. Below us the air tightened, like a fist closing around the chest. My lamp threw a cone of light that cut the dark into manageable pieces. But the darkness between the cones felt thicker than the dark itself. Levi kept the pace, measured, unhurried. He moved like a man who has to be responsible not just for bodies, but for small truths timelines. Signatures, the sequence of steps that proves you were somewhere and did something. We counted off in whispers. 10 meters, 20, 50. The ladder ended at a maintenance gallery concrete tunnels lined with rusted conduits, handrails eaten raw by time. The facility's HVAC exhaled with a tired, intermittent sigh. Avi paused to sweep the spectrum. "There's a scatter here," he whispered, fingers on the receiver. The waterfall of frequencies looked like static cloud on the screen. He frowned, adjusting gain. Phase jitter, not local. He did not sound alarmed, only interested, like a man who'd found a new note to follow. We moved single file, lights low, breath measured. Every sound seemed exaggerated. The clink of a carabiner, the ragged breath of Iteen as he checked charges, Yal's soft humming, a thread that stitched across the passage. The hum changed key after every corner, as if drawing notes from the walls. Once somewhere behind me, I heard a faint clatter like a toolbox dropping. But when I turned, Iteen's grin was a pale, steady thing, and his packs were intact. He shrugged. Old pipes. We kept walking. At the first junction, our map disagreed with the corridor. The plan showed a right-hand bend. The corridor forked left. I checked my GPSN encrypted field unit that normally ate mountains for breakfast. Its coordinates wavered, digits stuttering between two locations as if trying on positions like garments. Glitch, I told them. Avi didn't look convinced. He tapped the unit and muttered about multipath returns. Multipath reflection. Geology words that should calm a mission sense, yet somehow felt thin. We passed a maintenance hatch scrawled with graffiti, a looping symbol like a spiraled eye. It glowed faintly where our lamps struck it, phosphorescent like algae. Yael stopped and ran gloved fingers over the symbol. Her humming stopped midline. Her hand trembled, not from cold. "This wasn't on any imagery," she said, voice flat. "I should have pulled a tag photograph, catalog, analyze, but my hands felt clumsy, so the dark had thickened into syrup." Time began to misbehave in small, irritating ways. Iteen swore the watch on his wrist lost 20 seconds. My own watch, a cheap quartz I kept for redundancy, gained a minute. We compared. Levi only nodded and tucked both watches away. He said nothing about the sense that our 90-minute limit was shrinking like a skin in heat. The mountain kept time on its own terms. A tremor hummed underfoot, subtle at first, then pulsed like a distant heartbeat. The walls, for an instant, seemed to vibrate in sympathy. Dust rained down from unseen seams. The frequency of the tremor overlapped with a signal of E, suddenly isolated a series of phase-locked pulses at 41-hour intervals. I remembered the analyst's note. The mountain did have a heartbeat. Cums dropped out in a pocket, then returned with a slur-my voice, delayed and layered, as if the recording had been played back on a scratched vinyl. I heard my own whisper followed by an extra syllable I did not speak. Avi listened, shoulders tightening. "It's echoing something," he said. Not us." At one choke point, a door barred our path. Thick, military-grade steel with a keypad eaten away by rust. Someone had welded a small plate over a manufacturer's stamp. Beneath, the letters were illegible. K. On the door, a set of glyphs had been etched, geometric and precise, and they did not belong to any alphabet I knew. When Levi placed his palm against the metal, his jaw flexed. For a second, his face, always composed, flickered. He straightened, exhaled, and signed the next line on the timeline. Ingress confirmed. 90 minutes. He looked at each of us. We get in. We go fast. I-10 set a charge with the casual thoroughness of a man who sees the world in points of initiation. He clicked his lighter 3 times the ritual, then the flame guttered, and went out on the third strike, as though someone had blown it from within the stone. He cursed low, struck again, and the flame flared. He glanced back over his shoulder, eyes too bright. "Just wind," he said. But his voice was too steady to be comfort. We breached the door and stepped into a corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and something like old blood, metallic. Sweet wrong. The beam of light found a staircase that spiraled down into darkness that didn't respect depth. The air below felt colder, and the static on my skin hardened into a sensation like pressure behind the eyes. We moved deeper. Each step felt like subtraction. The mountain was keeping notes, and we were being copied into them. The staircase coiled downward like the vertebrae of something buried alive. Concrete gave way to hewn stone, then to a composite material none of us recognized, smooth, seamless, faintly iridescent under the lamps. The walls swallowed sound. Our boots struck without echo, as though the space itself refused to admit we were present. At 30 meters down, the air shifted. My oxygen monitor jittered again, needle flickering between optimal and danger. Yael checked hers. It held steady. She frowned, tapped the gauge, then leaned close. "Your body feels normal?" she asked. I nodded, though in truth my chest carried a subtle weight, like I was inhaling water. She hummed one of her lullabies under her breath, softer than a moth's wing. The walls seemed to lean in, listening. We entered the first chamber. It was Vastan atrium carved into the mountain's heart, higher than any natural cavern should allow. Catwalks latticed the space, iron corroded but intact, bolted to walls marked by glyphs. They weren't painted or carved, they were embedded, as if the stone had grown them. Some glowed faintly, like stars beneath the skin of rock. Eaton exhaled a low whistle. "Not Iranian engineering," he muttered. He crouched, touched the floor, then pulled back sharply. "Cold," he said. "Too cold for this depth." His palm steamed in the lamplight. Levi ordered silence. His voice carried poorly here, falling flat after a meter. Gestured us forward. His gray eyes narrowed, as though he too felt the weight of unseen things moving just beyond the visible. Avi lingered at the edge of the chamber, antenna extended, receiver pressed to his ear. His brow furrowed. "It's clean," he whispered. "But to clean. Like something's canceling." Avi lingered at the edge of the chamber, antenna extended, receiver pressed to his ear. His brow furrowed. "It's clean," he whispered. "To clean. Like something's canceling background noise." He turned to dial. Hum bled into our headset, slow, steady, mechanical, but not human-made. A heartbeat disguised the static, the same 41-hour pulse. Yael noted the temperature on her wrist sensor, dropping 2 degrees every 5 minutes. She wrapped her jacket tighter. Her breath fogged, though the instruments insisted the air was above freezing. "Inconsistency," she said softly, as though naming it might control it. We crossed the catwalks, each step trembling faintly beneath our boots. Far below in the atrium's pit, liquid shimmered in pools black but reflective, like oil that had learned how to imitate water. Ripples disturbed the surface, though no wind reached here. When my lamp caught the pool at the right angle, I saw faces looking up. Not mirrored faces, pale and elongated, mouths moving in silence. I looked away. The moment I did, a voice threaded into my cum, quiet, intimate. "You dropped something." I froze. My coin. My hand shot back to my packet was still there. pressed cold and certain against the comms unit. No one else reacted. I said nothing. At the chamber's far end, a bulkhead door loomed, like the rusted one before. This was immaculate polished steel, seamless edges, no visible hinges. It stood ajar, enough to leak a pale light that flickered irregularly. Not fluorescent, not fire. Something in between, Levi gestured. Halt. His face was unreadable, but his knuckles were white on the rifle grip. We regrouped. Yale scanned vitals, heart rates elevated. Mine spiked highest, though I forced my breathing into cadence. Itan tapped his lighter 3 times. No flame this time. He pocketed it without a word. Avi whispered. The hum is louder inside. He looked directly at the door, his eyes catching the pale light. For a second, his pupils dilated fully, swallowing iris and sclera. He blinked hard, shook his head, and muttered, "Signal bleed. I'm fine." We advanced. The air grew denser, compressing thought into fragments. My chest felt filled with static. The glyphs on the walls pulsed faintly in sequence like a code. I didn't recognize the pattern, but some part of me understood. A rhythm, a calling. We crossed the threshold. The door shut behind us with no sound at all. And then the real descent began. Inside the bulkhead, we found corridors arranged in a geometry that defied ordinary blueprints. Hallways ran at impossible angles. One seemed to slope upward, yet took us deeper. Another bent so gently we didn't notice we'd turned until our compass needles wavered. Levi forced discipline. "Routine protocol," he ordered. His voice steadied us, a metronome of command. We clipped chem lights at intervals, marking return points. Every 20 meters, Avi left a coded transponder ping, a breadcrumb in frequencies only we could track. We moved as if in any hostile installation, rifles angled, corners cleared, vitals monitored. At first it felt almost normal. We logged air samples, heat signatures, particulate data. Yael knelt, instruments out, her gloved hands efficient as she scraped dust into sterile vials. She muttered chemical profiles: silicon, calcium, trace uranium. Her tone was clinical, reassuring. Maitin checked load-bearing beams, murmuring about structural stresses, already cataloging where a charge might bring the ceiling down. The lighting was our only relief, narrow tubes recessed into the walls, glowing faintly white. They flickered when our lamps approached, but never failed completely. Yael speculated they were powered by some archaic backup grid. Aitan joked about Iranian electricians. No one laughed, but the banter helped. We reached a chamber lined with consoles, old, dust-laden, Soviet-era designs bolted into walls of material that predated them. Banks of gauges, levers, oscilloscopes, none powered. Avi brushed dust off a dial, traced Cyrillic letters. "These were placed here, not built here," he said. He turned a knob. Nothing. He pressed his receiver to the metal frame, listened. Then he nodded once, as if reassured. Levi logged everything on a field tablet. "This is infrastructure," he said, voice calm. "Not weapons. Control systems, maybe ventilation. No enrichment signatures yet." He glanced at me. "We keep moving." We 8 minutes carefully, counting them against the 90. Every corner was mapped, every anomaly tagged. Still, beneath the ritual of procedure, unease crept. My oxygen gauge swung once, steadied. Yael's hummed. Avi caught faint bursts on the spectrum, but logged them as noise. The rhythm of normal operations lulled us. For a while we believed we were still in control, that our training, our gear, our discipline could tame the strangeness pressing at the edge of perception. But the hollow was patient. Patience is the cruelty of things older than men. It began with a sound so faint I thought it was my own breath leaking through the mask, a whisper, irregular, brushing the ear like static. Then Avi froze mid-step, antenna half-raised. "You hear that?" he asked. We stopped. The corridor exhaled silence. Only the low hum of our oxygen regulators remained. Then click, metallic, deliberate. From behind us. Aitan swung his rifle up, jaw tight. "Not pipes," he muttered. His voice lacked the swagger he used for comfort. Levi gestured, "Discipline." "Hold, listen." We obeyed. The sound came again, farther this time, like footsteps dragged against stone, moving just beyond light. Our chem lights at the junction glowed steady, untouched. Yael checked her watch. Her lips moved as she counted seconds. "No echo," she whispered. Footsteps without echo. I lifted my lamp, sweeping back. Nothing. Just dust motes drifting like faint embers. But my stomach clenched. The motes weren't falling, they rose, spiraling against gravity in a slow ascent. My oxygen gauge rattled, needles spiking into empty, then bouncing back. I tapped it. The motion should have steadied it. Instead, the gauge trembled harder, like something was breathing through it. Avi adjusted the dial on his receiver. A voice slipped out soft in Farsi. The words came jagged, cut by static. Leave it. Buried. His eyes widened. It's not transmission, he said, voice hoarse. It's bleed. No carrier. Levi's jaw set. Ignore it. Stay on timeline. His command cut sharp, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. We moved faster, but the sense of being followed deepened, not chased observed. The corridor seemed to flex with our passing, angles shifting too subtly to log. At the next junction, one of our chem lights lay on the floor. It pulsed faintly, though none of us had placed it there. Yael whispered something in Hebrew, half prayer, half diagnosis. She pressed fingers to the wall. It's warmer here, she said. Like blood under skin. I-10 cursed, too loud. His lighter clicked once, twice, 3 times in his pocket. No flame. Only the sound, crisp in the silence. The hollow had acknowledged us. The disturbance did not fade. It multiplied. Our lamps began to betray us, flickering not in unison but in sequence, as if something invisible passed in front of each beam, one by one. The shadows stretched unnaturally, peeling away from our bodies like stains on wet paper. Mine lagged half a heartbeat behind every movement. When I raised my rifle, its silhouette still pointed low. Itone muttered, not funny. His shadow leaned forward as though listening. At the floor junction, the dust betrayed something impossible. Footprints. Bare, elongated, pressed deep into the grime. They led forward into the unlit passage, overlapping our own boot prints as though anticipating our route. Levi knelt, studied them in silence. He reached to touch the impression. His fingers hovered, stopped short. Then he stood, voice low. We don't track them. We stay mission. But our discipline frayed. Yael's hum grew louder, strained as though to drown out something only she could hear. Avi's receiver hissed with bursts of signal, words folding inside each other, Hebrew. Russian, Arabic, none distinct, all speaking at once. His lips moved with the cadence, unconscious mimicry. The air pressed heavier. My lungs felt swollen, every breath dragging metal across bone. The oxygen gauge swung again. Empty, full, empty. I inhaled, tasted copper. At 41 minutes, our return path betrayed us. The chem lights weed clipped green, numbered, impossible to confuse, no longer marked straight corridors. The last 2 we found were fixed 2 opposite walls of the same hallway. Pulsing as if alive, their glow synchronized with the hum Avi tracked on his receiver. Itone cursed, unclipped a fresh stick, cracked it. The light spilled out red. He dropped it at his feet. It pulsed once, then went dark. His hands shook as he reached for another, but Levi's command bark froze him. No more markers. We advanced deeper. The walls shifted subtly, narrowing until my shoulders brushed stone. Every step was slower. The silence between breaths lengthened, waited as though something filled the space we could not see. Then movement. Flickers at the edge of vision. Shapes not quite human, too thin, too tall, limbs bending at wrong joints. They vanished when faced directly, existing only in the periphery. My body reacted before, thought her full up. Safety off. Levi's hand pressed mine down. His eyes, gray and wide, told me what his words didn't. Firing here would be useless. The flickers followed anyway. The cadence of unseen steps behind us matched our pace, then exceeded it, scurrying just beyond light. At 49 minutes, Yael stopped dead. She pointed at the wall. The glyphs there weren't static anymore. They pulsed, glowing faintly like veins under skin. The rhythm matched the tremor underfoot, that same heartbeat we'd tracked since briefing. Her lips moved. It's alive. The words echoed not once but thrice, layered in 3 voices. 1 hers, 2 others not. The hollow was no longer observing. It was answering. The hollow revealed itself when we crossed what Levi later called the rupture chamber. It began with sound, not thunder, not rockfall, but a resonance like 1,000 voices whispering inside metal lungs. The vibrations crawled up my boots into my bones. My teeth hummed, fillings rattling. Yael pressed her palms to her ears, yet I could still hear her sobbing under the sound. Our beams swept across the chamber. At first it looked like a natural cavern, dome-shaped, with fractured basalt ridges arching overhead. Then the light caught on geometry too precise to be natural, columns grown like bone. Ribbed and spiraling upward, each carved with those same glyphs that now burned brighter than our lamps. Avi whispered, "Signal spike off. The scale." His receiver screamed, needle buried. He turned in circles, antenna trembling. The static wasn't random anymore. It formed syllables. It was chanting. We weren't alone. Aitan swore under his breath, raised his rifle. His lamp locked on movement. At first, I thought it was smoke. Pale shapes seeping from the walls, lengthening into figures. Skin like translucent parchment. Eyes pits of milk. Limbs jointed wrong, too many elbows. The footprints made sense now, but they didn't walk forward. They unfolded, as if peeled from shadow itself. Each step left no sound, only the hollow impression in the dust. When my breath hitched, they all turned at once, heads snapping, toward me in unnatural synchronicity. Their faces shifted subtly in the lamp beam, one moment blank masks, the next, distorted reflections of us. I saw my own face on one, slack-jawed, eyes black. Levi barked, weapons steady, hold formation. His voice shook despite the command. The creatures didn't advance, not in a way we understood. They flickered one moment 20 meters away, the next within 5, without crossing the space between. Their mouths opened in unison. The sound was silence made physical, crushing as though they were inhaling us into them. My ribs locked, unable to expand. Yal fell first, dropping her med pack, clutching her chest. Her hum turned shrill, breaking into a scream. They're inside me. Her shadow writhed, elongating across the floor, splitting into 3. The creatures tilted their heads toward it like animals scenting prey. One extended an arm, impossibly long, fingers like antennae. It brushed her shadow, not her body. Her shadow on Yal convulsed as if struck by lightning. Aitan lost control. He fired. The muzzle flash painted the chamber staccato white. The round struck the nearest figure and passed through. No blood, no wound, only ripples like bullets entering water. But the entity reacted. Its form splintered, shards of pale light scattering outward. For a heartbeat I thought we'd heard it. Then those shards darted into the others, multiplying them. Now there were more. Levi grabbed Aitan's shoulder, snarling through clenched teeth. No fire. No fire. His eyes burned with the understanding that aggression fed them. But it was too late. The ruptured chamber throbbed with living light, the glyphs pulsing like arteries. The entities advanced, not walking, but phasing, each flicker closing the distance. They began to mouth our names, one by one. I heard mine, dragged out of the static, like a confession I'd never spoken. Aviscum's unit burst into coherent words at last. Opening, it said, in a voice that was not his. Then his eyes rolled white, his mouth moving in time with the static. He was no longer relaying, he was receiving. The chamber shook, dust fell in streams. A seam split open in the far wall, stone grinding against itself. Behind it glowed not light but void black, endless, yet somehow radiant. We had found the heart of the hollow, and it had found us. The seam in the chamber wall yawned wider, stone folding away like rotten flesh. The void beyond didn't cast light, it drained it. Our lamps bent toward it, beams curving, swallowed whole. The air grew heavier, metallic, as though every molecule was infused with rust and old blood. Levi tried to pull us back into formation, his voice iron, eyes on me. Stay sharp. But already the team was breaking. Yael staggered, her scream throttled into silence. Her shadow was no longer her on it, writhed in multiple directions, elongating across the floor like spilled ink searching for exits. She pressed her stethoscope against her own chest, as if listening for proof of life. Then she laughed her broken, high-pitched sound. "I can hear them," she whispered. "Hearts, but not human. Different chambers. 20, 30. Some beat in centuries, some in seconds." Her hands shook violently. She tried to scribble notes on her medical pad, but the writing wasn't Hebrew, wasn't English symbols. Like the glyphs on the walls spilled from her pen, her own fingers no longer obeying her training. Levi pulled her back, but her eyes no longer tracked him. They followed the chamber walls. Avi stood frozen, antenna trembling in his grip. The static from his set had stabilized into a cadence, each burst syncing with the pulse of the glyphs, and his lips parted. The words that spilled out weren't his. "We are not new. You are young." The voice came in a layered chorus, metallic and harmonic, broadcasting not from the radio but through him. His throat vibrated unnaturally. His eyes rolled white. I shook him, shouted his name. His pupils snapped back, but the voice continued, using him like a speaker. It wasn't transmitting anymore. It was the antenna. Aiton backed away, muttering, "Shut him up. Shut him up." Levi knocked it aside. "No firing?" Levi barked again. But his face betrayed the cracks forming in his command, a leaking through the discipline. The chamber's tremor set Aiton's, satchel rattling plastic explosives carefully wrapped. He crouched instinctively, securing the straps. But when he touched the detonators, his fingers bled, not from cuts from splitting. His fingerprints peeled away like brittle tape, replaced with faint glyph patterns, glowing dull orange. He stared at his palms, breathing fast. What the hell? What the hell is this? The glyphs pulsed in rhythm with the seam, as though his body had been added to the chamber's circuit. He pulled a block of C for free, and the glyph spread across its casing, veins of light carving into the plastic. The charge responded. I swore under my breath, "Put it down, I-10." But he grinned, teeth clenched, manic. "It likes me." His eyes glittered fever bright. Levi alone seemed untouched, but I saw it in his silence. His hand rested on his sidearm, knuckles white. He kept glancing at his watch. The second hand wasn't moving normally. It ticked forward, then back, looping the same second over and over before jumping ahead by minutes. He never acknowledged it. He just clenched his jaw, as though by ignoring the distortion he could hold his reality intact. The air pressed harder in my chest. Every breath scraped raw. My vision fractured frames overlaying one another like film reels running out of sync. For moments, I saw two teams instead of one. One alive, one skeletal, their skulls tilted toward the seam as though in worship. I blinked, and only the living remained. For now, then the entities advanced again. They no longer mimicked us. They had learned us. On Bor Yael's face, speaking her fractured hum. Another whispered Avi's static voice, perfect cadence. A third held Aiton's manic grin. The chamber pulsed. The seam widened further, and we were no longer a team. We were instruments. The rupture chamber convulsed. Stones screamed like bending steel, splitting into jagged ribs. The seam in the wall no longer looked like a crack, it was a wound. A wound opening wider, bleeding black radiance that warped the very air. My lamp bent sideways, its beam devoured, swallowed by the hollow brightness beyond. Avi dropped to his knees, antenna scraping stone. His voice surged with the static chorus, no longer layered, harmonized. His throat convulsed. Words forced through him like scripture. You built upon our graves. You dug into our lungs. You breathed what was not yours. The chamber answered with tremors. Dust cascaded in streams. My fillings rattled in my teeth. Levi snapped. Form line. Cover the breach. His voice cracked across the coms, but half the team no longer obeyed. Yael staggered forward, eyes wide, shadow fracturing beneath her like broken glass. She reached for the void, whispering medical terms, arteries, ventricles, capillaries, like a diagnosis for the world itself. The glyphs on the walls pulsed in sync with her voice. She wasn't analyzing. She was translating. Her hand touched the edge of the void. Her arm flickered, present absent, present skin splitting into layered transparencies, like she existed across multiple dissections at once. Her scream tore raw. I didn't lunge to pull her back. But the void liked him more. The explosives in his pack glowed, glyphs spreading like fungus across the satchel. He ripped one block free, holding it like a child. His grin split too wide. Look, it's alive, it listens. The charge pulsed like a heart in his palm. Levi aimed his sidearm. Drop it, Aiton. But the chamber spoke through him. His glyphlet fingers crushed the detonator. Instead of fire, the C4 dissolved into tendrils of light that lanced into the breach. The wound widened further, stone bowing inward, as if the chamber fed on his offering. Entities poured through, no longer pale, Flickering silhouettes, they emerged fully formed. Tall, skeletal frames draped in shadows, faces fluid, adopting and discarding ours with every step. When one turned toward me, I saw my father's face, though he had been dead 15 years. They spoke without mouths. "You are the memory of what comes after. We are what came before." Levi fired. This time, the bullet did not pass through. It froze midair, suspended, then bent backward, embedding into the wall behind us. The entities did not flinch. They advanced, shadows reaching. Avi convulsed, blood streaming from nose and ears, the antenna vibrating like a tuning fork. His voice rose higher, mechanical tones replacing words, screeches, frequencies, harmonics. Then it stabilized in an electronic chorus. Through him, the breach answered. For one impossible second, I understood, my mind filled with diagrams. Cities built inside bones, stars used as vessels, time folded like paper. Too much, too fast. My nose bled. I ripped my headset off, but the sound was still inside me. The commander's face was granite, carved with dread. He knew. This mission wasn't salvage. It was contagion. Extraction route now, he roared, voice ragged. He shoved me toward the far passage, dragging Avi's limp body. Yale writhed at the breach. Itine fed it with light. The chamber walls pulsed like arteries alive. I looked back once. The entities weren't chasing. They didn't need to. They had opened the wound. One stepped fully through. Its shadow stretched across all of ours, merging them into a single, writhing stain. It raised a hand, and though it made no sound, I heard the message carved into my skull. We are patient. We are temporary. Then the chamber ceiling fractured. Stone collapsed, severing my sightline. Levi dragged me into the dark. We ran. Or rather, Levi dragged me while my legs obeyed only half their commands. My chest burned. The air was too thick, heavy with metal and ash. The corridors no longer obeyed the maps in my head. Every turn folded back on itself, walls narrowing, then stretching wider than a cathedral. Behind us, the ruptured chamber groaned like a collapsing lung. The entities did not pursue with speed. They didn't need to. Their flickers haunted every corner, glimpsed in the edge of vision, elongated arms brushing the walls as if shepherding us forward. Levi barked orders through gritted teeth. Stay focused. One path, one way out. His eyes darted constantly to his watch, whose hands now spun like a compass needle under a storm. He never admitted what we both saw. Time was unraveling behind us. Yael never escaped the breach. Her shadow had fused with the void, her body jerking in silent convulsions. The last glimpse I caught, her face split into layers like anatomy slides, each screaming at a different tempo. Levi wrenched me away before I could move toward her. We left him cradling his glowing charges like infants. The glyphs crawled up his forearms, ribs glowing through his skin. His eyes burned with devotion. And once more he whispered as the seam swallowed him whole. Avi we dragged, limp, half-conscious. His cum set sparked and died, but his throat still clicked with faint electronic tones, syllables no human tongue could form. Every few steps his body jerked as though jolted by unseen signals. Sometimes he mumbled coordinates, none of them real. The deeper we pushed, the more the hollow bled into us. Our lamps cut corridors that rearranged themselves the moment we blinked. Glyphs spread along the stone, pulsing faintly. My lungs struggled against the weight in the air.
Ice.
Every breath tasted like rusted copper coins. Levi forced brakes only when the tremors grew too violent to stand. Check oxygen, he ordered, voice hoarse. But my gauge spun empty, then full, then redlined. I stopped checking. The numbers meant nothing anymore. At T+108 minutes, we reached the shaft, the same elevator chamber that had brought us down. At least it looked the same. The walls were slick with condensation now, glyphs etched into the steel like cancer. The cable swayed, though no wind stirred. Levi yanked the lever. The elevator screeched, groaned, and began its ascent. I braced Avi's twitching body against the wall. Every meter upward felt like climbing through a throat that wanted to swallow us back down. Halfway up, the lights cut out. The darkness wasn't absence, it was presence. Heavy breathing void. Shapes moved below, dozens, maybe hundreds, staring upward. My skin knew their gaze even without sight. Levi whispered softer than I'd ever heard him. Don't move. The elevator continued grinding upward, impossibly slow. My watch ticked forward, then backward. Minutes stretched into hours. My heart pounded. When at last the hatch above opened, I couldn't tell if days or seconds had passed. We stumbled out into desert night. Stars swirled, wrong constellations misaligned, the horizon tilting. My lungs filled with air that wasn't right, tasted metallic like the hollow had followed us upward. Leva checked his wristwatch. He froze. 91 minutes below, he muttered. Then his face drained of color, but command says, "We've been gone 20 minutes. The contradiction hung between us, heavier than any entity. Avi stirred at last, his mouth twitching with static syllables. His eyes focused on the horizon, where shadows stretched in impossible directions. His voice carried not his tone, but theirs. You never left. We should have felt relief under open sky. Instead, the desert itself felt wrong, too sharp, too saturated. The moon seemed doubled, shadows falling in two directions. The sand underfoot hummed faintly as if alive. But the worst distortions were inside us. He lay propped against the transport crate, pale eyes wide as if tuned to something we couldn't hear. His voice was gone completely. When he tried to speak, only static spilled out, bursts of modulated tones like broken transmissions. At first I thought it was random. Then I realized the sounds had syntax, patterns. He wasn't speaking Hebrew anymore. He was a conduit, a radio tower carved into flesh. His gaze followed signals invisible to us. I caught him tilting his head to the sky, mouth twitching with tones, as though replying to voices only he could hear. He maintained his composure, or tried. He ordered reports, checked weapons, ran extraction drills, but something had rewritten his memory. When questioned by base command, he swore the facility was empty. He described bare halls, no glyphs, no breach, no entities. He recounted nothing of Yao, nothing of Iton, nothing of the rupture chamber. His conviction was chilling, as if reality itself had redacted him, yet I saw his watch when no one else did. The second hand ticked backward every few minutes, then jumped forward by hours. He never acknowledged it. He never would. I tried to sleep in the transport. I couldn't. The air around me pressed thick, metallic. My lungs still tasted of copper. My skin buzzed with unseen current. Shadows no longer obeyed the sun, they lagged, sometimes leading me by a half-second, sometimes peeling away entirely. I wrote notes feverishly in my field journal, but the words warped into glyphs the moment I looked back at them. Worst of all, Evie sometimes mouthed my name in static. Not his voice, but mine. A perfect copy of how I sounded, replayed like a recording of a future conversation I hadn't had yet. Yael was a race body gone, medical kit missing, her name unspoken. Itan never reached the surface. Charges were marked expended, though no blast had occurred. The official roster listed them as KIA structural collapse, but I remembered them differently, too vividly. We three survived, but survival was the wrong word. We were altered, and none of it could be undone. They took us in silence. No cheering, no relief, just black vans and men with clipboards. The desert vanished behind steel doors, replaced with sterile white halls that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. We were separated immediately. Avi was wheeled away, electrodes already taped to his skull. Levi walked under his own power, but his eyes were blank, his jaw set like stone. I tried to ask questions. Where were they taking us? What would happen to the report? But my words felt muffled, like I was speaking underwater. No one answered. They sat me in a chair bolted to the floor. A single lamp buzzed overhead. Across the table, two officers in pressed uniforms flipped through files. Their faces betrayed nothing to calm, too rehearsed. One of them began reading. His voice was smooth, clinical. Subject reports indicate subterranean entry into abandoned facility. Structural instability. Collapsed chamber. Casualties Yal Tan. Survivors, Commander Levi, Communications Specialist Avi, and yourself. No hostile contact encountered. I almost laughed. That's not what happened. He didn't flinch. He simply adjusted his glasses and slid a typed report across the table. My supposed testimony. I scanned the pages. The words weren't mine, but they carried my signature, my handwriting, my phrasing. Even details only I could have known twisted into something sterile. When I tried to correct him, the language twisted in my mouth. Every sentence reshaped itself mid-air. There were entities became There was dust. The breach opened, became the chamber collapsed. The truth would not survive translation. I glimpsed Levi in the corridor later. He walked out of his debrief upright, eyes unblinking. When I pressed him, desperate, "You saw them? Tell them what we saw." He only frowned. "There was nothing there," he said flatly. "Just an empty ruin. You're remembering wrong." But his hand never left his watch. The second hand spun backward as he spoke. Through a narrow window, I saw Avi strapped to a bed of instruments. His mouth opened and closed, static bursting from his throat in measured pulses. The officers recorded every sound like scripture. When I pressed my ear to the glass, I realized the tones weren't random. They spelled glyphs, syllables of the hollow translated into frequencies. The men in white coats smiled as though receiving a transmission long awaited. At the end, they slid a final document across the table. Restricted Archive Level 5 Classification Incident. Null facility. My signature already marked the bottom. "Sign again," the officer said. His tone left no space for refusal. I signed. My hand moved without me. Our mission no longer existed. The facility did not exist. The breach, the entities, the symbols, none of it had ever happened. Levi was reassigned to a desk job in Tel Aviv. Avi disappeared into medical research. I was told I'd be rotated to signals intelligence, effective immediately. But the hollow came with us. When I tried to sleep, the lamp above my bunk flickered in glyphs. My field notes rewrote themselves overnight. Shadows whispered at the edge of the room, and always the metallic taste lingered on my tongue. The truth was sealed, buried, catalogued in a non-existent archive. But suppression does not erase, it only waits. I have stopped sleeping, not because of fear, but because sleep is no longer a boundary. When my eyes close, the hollow opens. At first it was subtle reflections in glass, patterns in shadows. Now it is everywhere. The hum of the fluorescent light in my quarters beats like a pulse, steady as a heart. When I match my breath to it, the walls ripple. Symbols crawl across the paint like veins, bright and wet, then vanish when I blink. The doctors tell me it's stress. Residual trauma, they say. They give me pills that dissolve into ash before touching water, but I've learned to stop arguing. Denial is their doctrine. Still, I keep writing, not for them. For whoever finds this. 2 nights ago, the shadows moved without light. A figure stood at the end of my bunk, not Levi, not Avi, not anyone I knew. Its head brushed the ceiling, too tall for the room, shoulders tapering like an insect's frame. Where its face should have been, the symbols burned GL's glyphs, the one she traced in the dirt before the hollow took her. It did not move. It did not need to. My pulse aligned with the hum of the lamp again, and the world tilted. Suddenly I was back in the corridor, dust rising against gravity, the air thick as water. The footsteps without echo followed, circling, pressing closer. My rifle weighed nothing in my hands. I raised it, fired. The recoil slammed through my bones. But no bullet left the chamber, only a sound. A metallic click. The same click I heard that first night in the dark. When I woke, the bunk beneath me was gone. I was standing barefoot on concrete, toes at the edge of a drawn circle. The glyphs glowed faintly, heat rising from the lines like fresh blood. In my palm lay my oxygen gauge. The needle spun freely, faster and faster, then froze, pointing upward, toward the ceiling. And in the silence, I understood. The hollow was not buried. It was not waiting. It was here. It always had been. I write this last page as my lamp flickers. The symbols are spelling themselves out in rhythm, one by one, not in Hebrew, not in Farsi, not in any tongue I know. But I can feel their meaning in my bones. They are not telling me to leave. They are telling me to open.